Hello everyone, my name is Jordan Gesell and I work at the Mississippi Entomological Museum, which houses the largest collection of arthropods and insects in the state of Mississippi. Here we have over 1.6 million specimens of insects that have been preserved, and some of them have been here for quite a long time. Now this museum has been around since at least the 70s, but some of these insect specimens are over 100 years old, some of them even going back to the late 1800s. Alright, so the museum has been in this building, in the Clay Lyle Entomology Building, for about 50 years now, at least. And our museum is constantly expanding. We're constantly adding new material to it and new insect specimens to it every year. Now, the building isn't getting any bigger, so instead what we have done is we have made the museum smaller. We have taken this larger museum and compacted it into a smaller space using these compactors. And so these compactors have a lever on them that, when turned, allows it to move whole parts of the museum. And so this way we can squeeze all of these insects into a much smaller space without taking up walking room. Now, on the side of each one of these compactors, you'll see that we have this piece of paper here. And on the top is this weird looking Latin Greek word, it's Coleoptera. And what that is the order of insects that is contained within the compactor. Now there are bunches of different orders of insects. Beetles are in order, flies are in order, true bugs are in order, cockroaches are their own order. We use this in the same way that a library uses its category sections. In order to organize all the books so the librarian knows exactly where to find them, we know where to find insects within the museum using this. And so all these little names underneath this top one are insect families, and they're a smaller division. And we actually, in the museum, have representatives of the vast majority of insect families that live within Mississippi. So now within each one of these compactors, we have these metal cabinets, which you can open up, and inside are all of these wooden drawers. And each one of these drawers has a glass top on it so you can see the insects inside, and it can contain anywhere from tens to hundreds of individual insect specimens. Now, one of the first things that I want to show y'all in the museum is this drawer right here, containing what we commonly call the Luna moth. Now, all of these insects in this drawer are all the same species, but we still have a whole bunch of different specimens. And the reason why we do that is so we can capture the diversity that we find within that species. Now, if you plucked a random human off of the face of the planet, you couldn't use that one person to represent all of humanity. Humanity looks very different in different parts of the world, and so you need lots of us in order to get a full picture of what humankind actually looks like. And so we do the same thing with insects, because each one of them is as unique as you or I are. And so you can see here within the Luna moths, they come in all sorts of different shades of green, and yellow, and blue, and sometimes even white. So the next drawer that I'd like to show y'all is a drawer full of very, very tiny beetles. Now these beetles are called all sorts of different things. Some of them are called flower beetles, skin beetles, carpet beetles. And in the museum, we call them dermestids because they're in the family Dermestidae. And they are a great example of a really tiny insect that we have lots and lots of specimens of. In fact, the vast majority of insect specimens in the museum are very tiny because the vast majority of insects in the world are very tiny. The ones that we can easily see with our naked eye are actually only a small portion of what is actually out there in the world. And so if we want to represent what's really in the world, we have to have lots. Now, another interesting thing about these carpet beetles is that they are actually kind of our arch nemesis in the museum. And they're one of the main reasons why we need people to work in these museums to maintain these insect specimens. Because if left on their own, over time, these little beetles will actually get into our museum collections and eat them. And they will turn all of these preserved insects into powder and destroy countless thousands of hours of effort and time that went into collecting this data. And And so one of the things that we do in the museum is we make sure that these insects aren't infesting the drawers, and we sometimes will use chemicals to keep them out of them. Now the next group is a fascinating group of insects. They are huge and they are really awesome to look at. They're called Dobson flies. And sometimes if you live out in the country, or especially if you live near a body of water like a river or a lake, you might see these flying around your porch light at night because they're attracted to lights. Now Dobson flies are a really cool insect to show off because of their huge jaws. Now the males have jaws that are so large they actually can't even use them for anything. They can't use them for eating, they can't use them for biting. They're essentially so big they've been rendered useless. Now the females have much smaller jaws, and they can actually deliver a nasty bite if you happen to put your finger next to them. But Dobson flies are a really great example of what is called dimorphism, where the males and the females of the same species will look very different from one another. And in Dobson fly's case, it's so different that you can immediately tell which one it is just off of sight. And this group of insects is a personal favorite of mine. They're a small family of wasps that are called the ensign wasps. And some of you may have seen one in your house before. They are interesting because they hunt cockroaches, but they do it in a very unique way. They will find cockroaches and then they will lay their eggs on top of the egg case of the cockroach, and the baby wasp will eat the cockroach eggs inside of the case before they hatch. And then instead of cockroaches hatching out of the egg case, you get an ensign wasp instead. Now a really cool thing about the ensign wasps is their abdomens are very strangely shaped. Some of them are almost square in shape, and they're on this somewhat long, little tiny stick of a waist. And so if you look at one from the side while it's searching for a cockroach, its abdomen will be lifting up and down, and it almost looks like someone waving a flag side to side. Now, this part of our collection contains all of our tropical insects. We have a man who works here named John McDonald, and he goes down to the country of Panama, which is in Central America, about every year. And he often comes back with thousands upon thousands of beautiful insect specimens from the tropics. Now, an interesting thing about insects from the tropics is that they tend to be much bigger, more colorful, and flashier than insects you can find here in the United States. And so I will just pull an example drawer here of some of the immense diversity that can be found in the tropics. And so you can see that there are insects of all different types. A lot of them are somewhat familiar to us, but there's just something different about them. A lot of beetles and cockroaches and wasps, but they all are much flashier than you would find here in the United States. And it's not just insects that they have in the tropics. There are also lots of spiders and scorpions in the tropics as well that are much bigger than the ones we find here. An example right here is a tarantula. And also, an interesting species that you can find in the tropics is this one right here, these giant ants, which are called bullet ants, because they are purported to have one of the most painful stings in the world, feeling as painful as a gunshot wound. Stunning groups that you can find in the tropics are the tropical butterflies, and we have a whole collection devoted just to them back here. Now, one of my favorite things about our butterfly collection is just how immensely beautiful it is. I don't know the arrangement of the butterflies in these. I know that if I pull a random drawer out of this sequence, that I will find something fantastic. I'm going to pull this one right here, see if we can get a look. And these are butterflies that I believe came from Panama. Now, one of the most fascinating groups of butterflies are these. They are called the morpho butterflies, and they are fascinating because they have what looks like a reflective blue coating all over their wings, and it actually changes color depending on what angle you look at it from.
Lucky door number 3.
And this is my favorite drawer of morpho butterflies. These are just brilliantly shiny, and they're even better in person than they are on camera. So I hope that we get to see y'all in the museum again sometime soon. And I hope that it stirred your imagination, just so that you can think about just how many different kinds of insects that we found in here. Just the ones that I've shown you today are only a tiny, tiny fraction of what we actually have in here. So I hope it gets you thinking about how we can use this sort of information and all these different specimens to help us answer questions about insects and about the world. So thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you soon in person.